Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Hello, and welcome to the Rewrite Your Story podcast. This is episode 21. Wow. Can you believe it? It honestly baffles my brain to say that. Every week I upload these episodes of me just either chit-chatting by myself or chatting with a friend, and you people not only listen to it, but you get value from it. You know, the past couple episodes, my phone's been blowing up more than usual, and you guys just seem to be really getting a lot from the episodes that have been coming out for the past few weeks. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving me your feedback. Thank you for letting me know what kind of shifts you're starting to make in your life, because I started this podcast for younger me. It was something that I thought that, Amy of old could have really done with. And I wanted to put it out in the world in hopes that it could help some people. And getting your messages and hearing feedback from you guys, honestly, genuinely keeps me going. It's why this podcast is still going almost a year later, is because of you people. So thank you for tuning in and listening. It's really beneficial. And even for you guys who are tuning in and listening, but you're also sharing it with people that you think would benefit from hearing from it. We need more of you people in the world, because the more people that hear these kinds of messages and start adopting them in their everyday life, I know it sounds a bit corny to say, but it will genuinely start changing the world. So thank you for doing so. And for any of you new listeners, if you like this episode, if you like what I'm talking about, make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to, whether it's Spotify, Apple, YouTube, any platform. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new episodes. But I'm going to stop rambling as usual and just give you a bit of an insight into this week's guest. So some of you who are looking on YouTube right now will see an image, and you may, if you've been listening for a long time, may recognize the face. Steph German, she is back. I had her on quite early on in the podcast talking about safety, and I wanted to bring her back for this episode to talk about boundaries. When we talk about establishing boundaries, within our friendships, within ourselves, within a professional state, we really need to have that safety before we do so. And given kind of what Steph and I talked about in the last episode we did together, I thought this would be a great top up, a great next step to that. And even, off the back of Shauna's episode last week, where we were talking about having that kind of selfish month to yourself and putting you first, you've really got to be able to set boundaries to do things like that. So for any of you that have reached out and really liked the info that Shauna gave, but were kind of confused or struggling with how to take that first step, this episode is where the good juicy stuff is at. So like I mentioned, go get your journal, get comfy, and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Rewrite Your Story community. This podcast was created to inspire others to take power back into their own lives. I'm here to share the stories and tools that I have learned through my own life experiences, and my guests as well, to help you rewrite your story forever. This podcast is best paired with an open mind and a journal, so let's get comfy and dive right in. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Rewrite Your Story podcast. For those watching online, you will see we have a guest this week. And for those of you who've been watching kind of since the beginning, the early days, you will see that it's a familiar face. So Steph, for those who don't know you, if this is the first time they've connected with you, could you give us a little introduction into who you are?
Yes, I am Steph German. I am a one-on-one coach specializing in helping sexual trauma survivors and women with anxiety. And today I'm just going to talk about boundaries. So that's what I do. I run my own one-to-one coaching practice, and Yes, do all things talking about trauma and safety and anxiety, all of the wonderful people that need help with those things. So that's me.
Awesome. And like Steph said, we're here to talk about boundaries. I know I had Steph on a good while back and we were focusing quite a lot on safety, and safety is definitely part of the boundary realm for sure. But I feel like some of you guys, when you've reaching out to me and sending me messages and insights into episodes, that's one thing that keeps coming up is setting boundaries and being mindful of your energy. And I talked about it a few episodes ago where we talked about managing your energy, not time. And I just felt like when it came to boundaries, I'm like, boundaries speak safety. Who do I know who's all about safety and knows this world? I'm like, Steph. And I literally just messaged her like out of the blue. I'm like, hey, I have an idea of doing an episode on this topic. What do you think? And she's like, I'm in. So this is why we have her back. So Steph, I'd love to kind of know, I know we talked a little bit off, well, a lot of it off camera before this episode. We had some catching up to do. But we went quite deep into this realm, but I know we just talked about before we hit record that safety is kind of where it begins with boundaries. So I'd love to get more of your insight if you could speak to that a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And you already said it. It starts with safety. So as we talked about in the last episode that I was honored to be in is hashtag safety first. So in order to establish boundaries and understand what those need to be in our life in order to protect our energy, we have to know what safety feels like. So then we have kind of a foundation to work from. So just like when you're building a house, you need a foundation first. You can't start building walls and everything until you have the foundation for it. Well, in our bodies and in our lives, safety is that foundation. If we're not safe, we can't start building anything. So we can't start building a boundary until we've established safety. So it's so important to understand what it feels like to be safe for you. And that feels different for everybody. Everybody's kind of foundational start of feeling safe is going to be a little bit different. Our starting place is not the same from person to person, but it is about feeling safe. So when we start establishing boundaries, we need to understand, okay, am I feeling safe right now or am I not feeling safe? So if we're feeling activated, and you and I talked about this, like you said, a lot before we hopped in. But if you're feeling activated, meaning you're feeling nervous, you're feeling stressed, you're feeling unsafe, then it's important to establish safety first. Hashtag safety first. Yes.
I have a question. For those that aren't watching online, I put my hand up. I'm like, I have a question. When I've always wondered, and someone for me with the backstory I have and similar to yourself, it's tricky when you're always living in that hyperactive state, like because you think that's normal, you think that is safe, that's what you're used to. Like when you're saying it's noticing that activation, like, or noticing you're in that high frequency state, like how, if anybody's listening, like if they're struggling to name that, know when they're high activated because they live in that all the time, like what would be your advice or insight into that?
My insight is people know when they're stressed by the language that they use. I feel exhausted. I feel so tired all the time. Oh my gosh, work is just driving me nuts. My kids are driving me nuts. My spouse is driving me nuts, whatever the case may be. You can tell by the language that they feel. And even if you were to ask yourself in the mirror, how do I feel today? Oh, I feel like crap. I feel so stressed. That's how you know that you're activated. So you may not know, quote unquote, know, like in your body, what that feels like, but in your language that you use, how you would describe your day, how you would answer to somebody if they were to ask you how you're feeling. That's how you know. So for somebody that's never done any work in this realm, would you categorize yourself as stressed or would you not categorize yourself as stressed? If you would, then you could count that as being or feeling activated. Or if you would not categorize yourself as stressed, again, this is going to be unique to each individual that's listening. Your stress level is not my stress level, is not Amy's stress level, and vice versa. Right? If you yourself categorize yourself as stressed, you can consider yourself activated. And if you don't, then you can consider yourself in your realm of what we call normal. And you can start at that normal state Are you not stressed or are you stressed? Is how I would kind of answer that question. For somebody who's never done any work in this realm, it's a little bit tough just because sometimes we don't necessarily even know that we are stressed. We know that we're tired. We know that we're feeling worn down. We know that that all we want to do is sit on the couch, that we can't even muster up the energy to go for a walk. Or even if we can muster up the energy to go for a walk, it doesn't really feel that great.
Yeah. Or you're anxious on the walk because you're like, I have to laundry to do. I have to do this. There's so many things I got to do. I just got to get home. You can't even enjoy the walk. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's things like that you would have to almost notice about yourself in order to understand where your level of activation is. So there's, again, feeling safe, knowing that you're safe or knowing that you're activated takes work in and of itself. So for the purpose of this conversation, let's say that you know what that feels like in your body. Let's say that you know that your foundation of safety is there. Okay, the next step would be to understand what makes you feel unsafe. What does get you activated, or AKA triggers you?
Oh God, that word, everybody says all the time, oh, I'm so triggered. Oh, I'm so triggered. Like it's became like fun to use that word from what I see all the time on like social media. Like people
This
love
is gonna sound so cheeky of me, but the word triggered triggers me now. It's
yeah. Yes, I'm right there with you.
So anyways, if you're feeling activated, AKA triggered, meaning you feel stressed, you feel anxious, and you recognize that you're feeling stressed or anxious or irritated or angry or activated in any kind of way that does not match your sensation of safety or your normal foundation, then you can recognize like, oh, look at that, I'm activated. And then you get to be curious, do I need a boundary here? How often does this happen? What is currently happening? What am I currently experiencing that gave me the sensation of activation? Sensation of activation. I'm going to come up with something with that. But what gave you that sensation? What triggered you into that activation of your nervous system? So, and I think we talked about this a little bit on our previous episode, so I'll touch on it for a second. But when we come out of our safety zone, that means that our nervous system has been activated, i.e., our brain has been signaled that there is a stressor or a threat or something to be fearful of in our realm. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is that we're experiencing. Our five senses took in something that sent up that flag in our brain that says, ooh, this doesn't feel good. We should be worried. We should be stressed. We should be angry, i.e., lifting our nervous system up into that activated state. Activating our sympathetic nervous system that almost sends us into a fight or flight response. That's kind of where those sensations and feelings of anxiety and stress and irritability and anger all kind of live. And that's where boundaries are formed. So when we are in that space, we get to ask ourselves, okay, I'm feeling this way. What just happened? What am I experiencing? What did my five senses take in that didn't feel so great? And then we get to establish a boundary there until we heal that reason for the activation. So the boundary, very plain and simple. I do holidays with my family because they activate the shit out of me. So, I mean, until I can heal the wounds that are there with my family, I have created a loving boundary for myself that says, no, I will not join in on family festivities because it's just too much. And that's okay. That's my boundary. So again, the science behind it. Oh, Amy raised her hand again.
I have a question. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I think a lot of people need to hear that like they can set boundaries, especially with their family.
Yes.
But like it's one thing, your safety spot, when you've been triggered, you've been activated. For me, when we have the same color Yeti mug. Yeah, mine's in the kitchen. I think I've had it in other episodes. Sorry, I'm digressing. When I feel like I need to set a boundary, or at least when I first started setting boundaries, and I think a lot of people listening, that gut instinct will come like, oh, this isn't good for me. I should say no. I should, speak my mind or whatever. But a lot of the time we know we should do those things, but then we still crumble and revert. And then we get scared of setting the boundaries because it might upset somebody else. Somebody might think we're being selfish. God forbid I do something for myself. Like that was the stuff that used to come to me all the time when I first started setting boundaries, is how's that going to affect other people, or how will that affect how other people view me? How would you speak to that if any of the listeners or that sounds something that they struggle with?
My heart goes out to you, and I also experience that as well. Putting others' needs or others' desires before our own is often a survival mechanism, or as some would call a trauma response. It's kept us safe. Again, hashtag safety first, regardless of whether it's serving us, whether we feel it's serving us or not. We will always establish safety in the best ways that we know how. And putting others' needs before our own is a very common way to do that. Because if we please others, often what happens is they don't get mad, they don't get, angry, or maybe they'll praise you for doing something for them instead of for yourself.
Yeah.
It serves you in a different way, even though it feels icky on the inside. So, for those of you, I have a 4-year-old, so I often use words like icky or yucky. But it's those types of things where we would do it to avoid additional pain for ourselves, because we're already in pain and we don't want more pain. So we do something for somebody else because it's going to ultimately avoid more pain for ourselves. And I want everybody listening to know, oh, my dog's barking. I want everybody listening, and you too, Amy, to know that this is totally normal. This is a survival mechanism. It's kept you safe. It's kept you whole. It's kept you loved. It's kept you warm. Whatever it does for you, it's serving you in that way. And now, if you're looking at establishing boundaries, you're recognizing that it just doesn't feel good to do it. Yeah. You know why you do it, because you don't want to upset the other person. You don't want them to come after you in some way. But it doesn't feel good to put their needs before your own, and I mean, as far as progress goes, that's making tons of progress.
Yeah. Because I feel like if you don't set the boundary and you fulfill that need of like getting praise or whatever from the other person, or not upsetting them and not getting additional pain from them, you still get pain regardless, because by not setting that boundary for yourself that creates safety, you're putting yourself in a situation that isn't good for you, an experience that isn't good for you. So you're going to cause yourself pain anyway by not setting the boundary.
Yep. It's kind of like a measure of pain, right? So our brain, if you're living in that state of activation, again, meaning you're not feeling safe and you're constantly stressed or you're constantly activated, anything that you do isn't going to necessarily relieve pain, but our brain essentially chooses the lesser evil, no matter what.
Oh, that makes so much sense. I went for coffee with a girl that I know triggers me, and I don't like being around her, and I feel she's affects my energy, but I did it anyway because I was like, hanging out with her is better than the repercussions of saying no, because the issues I'll get from her, and then the issues I'll get from other people by saying no to her, I may as well just say yes, because that's the lesser of two evils.
Exactly. You will go through that logic in your brain no matter what, and it will serve you in some way, always. Right? So establishing those boundaries is essentially kind of breaking that. And it's really hard to do because it's having to release the energy of others. So when we talk about protecting energy, right? Everything is energy. We live in the metaphysical, right? And the energy is either making us feel good or it's making us feel bad. Like that's how this works, and there's no such thing as, good or bad energy for anybody. It just is. And we either mesh with that energy or we don't mesh with that energy. And if we don't mesh with that energy, it has a physical response, right? It makes us feel icky. It makes us feel yucky, right? So when we talk about protecting our energy and establishing boundaries, we have to realize, okay, this is the energy that I want to maintain, AKA safety first. I want to feel that foundation of safety. I want to feel safe and social. I want to feel happy. I want to feel joyful. There's that energy that we all would love to be in all the time. Now, life is life and energy is energy, and we will always be activated and always be deactivated no matter what. And placing boundaries around the things that we know activate us will help prevent us from dipping into that energy. So when we talk about protecting energy, that's all we're talking about. I don't jive with this person. This person doesn't have the energy that I like to be in. So I'm going to put a boundary around her. I'm going to say, no, I can't hang out with her. This is why, because every time I'm around her, this is the energy I feel, and that's not the energy that I want. And when I'm around her, this is why I feel activated, I feel stressed, I feel irritated, I feel angry, whatever you can name it. And then you place the boundary. So the next time she calls you, I'm so sorry. I can't hang out with you anymore. Or you just practice saying no. You tell her, no, sorry, I can't hang out today, right? You take it in steps, right? Or you dive right in, knowing that there's an energy for this. More physics, guys, more physics. First, we're talking about metaphysics. Now we're talking about regular physics. For every action, there is an equal but opposite reaction. You put energy out, you get energy back. Okay. So if you're putting energy out that is protecting you, that is protecting your good, that is protecting that feeling that you want to maintain, i.e. your foundation, #safety first, you're maintaining that by placing these boundaries, there will be equal and opposite reactions to your action. So of course, boundaries are going to make people pissed because their energy is the energy that you don't want anymore. And when you make that action, when you take that action to place that boundary, it's going to come back at you.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to know what your established sense of safety feels like first. Because then when that reaction comes back, you can feel it, but know that you're not going to take it in because you're already feeling safe. Because it's not yours, it's theirs. That's not your energy, that's their energy. It does not belong in your sacred vessel of your
Kick it out.
Kick it out. We did it.
And it's one of those, if you know it doesn't, if it's not good for you, why would you still choose it? Why are you choosing that pain? Why are you choosing that? And that goes back to like your self-worth and your safety. And I know we've talked about it in other episodes.
Round and around go.
Yeah. Wow. Like, oh, like when you say it, I'm like, oh, that sounds easy. That makes so much sense. And like
one of the hardest things any of us ever have to do in our entire life is to cut out those people that maybe you've been lifelong friends with, members of your family that you need to have boundaries around, and having the courage and bravery and knowing of your worth, an established sense of safety in order to do so.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work in and of itself to even establish one boundary. That's, I mean, if you're our age, Amy, like if you've been living like this for 3 decades,
Yeah.
that's cycles and patterns that we are so used to, that are so ingrained in our system and our nervous system to be activated, to live with that activation.
Oh yeah, you live with it.
Right? That when we talk about breaking that cycle, right? We've talked about cycle breakers is another, kind of like buzzword, right? Being a cycle breaker, breaking your own patterns, breaking your own cycles, right? That activate us all the time, like breaking that activation cycle, literally just the biological activation, breaking that cycle is a very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And it takes so much practice, so much practice.
It takes longer to unlearn than it took to learn it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, when a lot of us learn these patterns when we're children, and when we're children, that's all we do. We learn all day long. We're taking information in, we're being modeled certain things from our caregivers. It's harder to unlearn than it is to learn, because now that we're adults and we've evolved, our brains are already wired in those patterns. That's it.
With you talking on that, I want to touch on something we talked on off camera, about kind of when you talk about as we're kids, we develop things, we develop these mindsets that are there to save us and serve us and protect us. And one of the things we talking about off camera, like when we're talking about when we came to set boundaries, like I was saying that I started my journey with setting boundaries a good while ago, and I made some good leeway, but like there's still areas that I struggle with. But one of the places I started first when it came to setting boundaries, setting boundaries with other people was too scary for me at the beginning because, like Steph said, about how they'd react and things. So I started with setting boundaries with myself, be that self-talk, be that, and Steph, I'm sure can talk about it a bit better than I can, but there's this like alter ego I have. She's called Julie. I think I might have messaged her in other episodes, and she can be a bit of a bitch if I'm honest. Like, I just straight to the point, blunt, and like, and in addition to Julie, I have this other alter ego that's the performer. Like, I don't know if anybody even listened to the start of my podcast from the beginning, and even my probably first episode with Steph. I'm like, hey everybody, and na na na, like I have this like cheerleader persona that comes out, and like it's still me, it's still real, it's still honest, but there's this almost this fakeness that comes across. And like what I started setting those boundaries with me to get not get rid of them. I'll still tap into them if and when needed, but only in those moments. You know, they're there to help me, but at the same time, they don't serve me a lot. So I've been trying to set those boundaries with me to notice them and then step back from them. And I know, Steph, we talked a little off camera about this stuff, but I'd love if you could kind of go into a bit more on why those things come up and why we do those sorts of things, even when we know they're not good for us.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are all, let me start with this. So humans are multifaceted, right? As humans, we wear different hats, we behave certain ways in certain environments in order to accomplish something, right? So these behaviors have either A, been modeled to us by a caregiver, or two, it's something that's been, conditioned or learned through our experiences. And all of these personas that we put on, all of these hats that we wear, the ways that we behave serve a purpose to feel safe. So, and we talked about this, and if it's okay with you, I'd love to bring about the nervousness that we sometimes. Yeah. So, Amy, you had mentioned that you had felt nervous when you started your podcast, and that in order to feel comfortable, you put on your performer persona. So that nervousness arose, again, going back to the nervous system activation, that nervousness arose, and your persona of performing is what helped you feel safe. So that's why we do the things that we do. That's why oftentimes we behave differently at work than we do at home with our partners or with our kids or with our friends, or, when we're out running or whatever the case may be. We feel safe acting or behaving a certain way in certain scenarios. So that's why you have Julie. That's why you have your performer. Julie has helped you feel safe in times that, you didn't feel safe. Your performer has helped you, again, achieve something that you felt necessary in order to feel safe. So it's one of those things where, again, this is normal to have different faces, different hats, and the important thing to remember is, if our goal is establishing that foundation of safety, who are you in that safe space? Without the activation masks or hats that you're wearing, who are you in that safe space? Who are you really? Who are you when you feel your most comfortable, your most authentic, your most free, your most joyful, your most happy? And that's the important thing, is that's who you really are. And the other things, the other behaviors, the other hats that you end up wearing are also parts of you that just help you maintain that safety. They've kept you safe. They're beautiful parts. And the parts, yeah. So the parts that you don't like, AKA that you don't like about yourself, just ask, like, why don't I like that part of me? Be curious about him, her, or them. Who are they? And how have they served you? Why did you develop them? How did they come about? And understanding that your experience is absolutely beautiful and it's yours, and there's only one you. And that's beautiful too. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing to fix. You just get to be who you are and understand yourself on a deeper level should you choose to. So, I mean, establishing boundaries around yourself too. It's like, okay, the parts that you don't like that aren't serving you anymore, that you feel, oh, well, okay, I understand why that part of me exists. And I just don't need that part anymore. And I love that part of me for keeping me safe and serving me in the times that I did need that persona or ego or whatever you want to call it. And thank them and start to build that boundary. And talking about myself, oh, she doesn't really make me feel safe anymore. So when I start to feel that way, when I start to feel combative or, start to feel angry or something like that, check myself, and establish that boundary. Every time I feel this kind of activation, I'm going to double check myself. Do I need to feel this? Why is this part of me arising? What trigger happened? That can give me information. And then ask yourself, how do I want to show up? How do I want this to feel? By establishing this boundary, this is my intention. This is how I want to feel with it. This is how I want to show up with it. This is what I want to say when this happens. Rehearse in the mirror if you have to.
I've had to do that. I remember even having, especially in work, I always struggled with the power dynamics in a corporate environment, especially around males that were higher above me in the corporate ladder. And I would practice. I would have the conversation like 3 times. And then I'd also go in with notes to like make sure I said my no's and put my boundaries where I needed to, because this was still new to me. Amy of old, especially around men, would just crumble and tell them what they need and just say yes. But when I was working on that, I'm like, no, how can I be kind to myself and give me what I need? Well, I need to prepare. I need to put a bit of effort in because I'm worth that. So that's interesting, because like it's interesting to hear you say that, because it just brings it back home, and it's like, yeah, and it actually works, and it's doing it for you. Like if there's anybody on this planet that you're going to love more or could love more, why not let that be you? Like,
yeah, a lot of times, again, like you said, establishing that self-worth, understanding that you deserve to feel good. You deserve to have your needs met. You
yeah.
should have your needs met. Always. No question. No question. You get to have your needs met. Always. You get to feel good. Always. You're worth it. Always. There's no question. And we are conditioned and groomed and modeled that we're not worth it.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, we learned, oh, nope, I need to do this for everybody else. Or, in your case and in my case, I felt like, nope, the man is first. Like, I need to please him in order to be safe. Like, that's just how it was. And so much work is done in that realm. Again, when you're feeling activated, doing this work is near impossible if you're not feeling safe. Hashtag safety first. You are worth feeling safe. I cannot stress that enough. So it's one of those things where, yeah, yes, yes, and yes. There's cycles, there's feelings of unworthiness, feelings of activation. We need to feel safe in order to do this work. And it just takes practice. It takes so much practice, and understanding where you want boundaries is a good start.
Yeah.
Where you don't feel good, where you don't vibe, where the energy doesn't make you feel chill, talking
When you're
like the kids.
we're being cool. When you're saying like that's a good place to start, and I didn't prep you for this because these things just come up. If you were to set a homework, an assignment for anybody listening, on this topic of something that they can try to integrate in their everyday, or they can start doing, to make some sort of steps in the right direction with this area of boundaries and their safety, what would that be? What would you like listeners to try to do or be aware of?
Oh gosh.
Sorry, I didn't prep you for that.
That's okay. I think that's a heavy question for me, being honest. because without guidance, it's very difficult. Having a therapist to help you navigate through this, or having a coach to help you navigate and help guide is instrumental in this type of work. But if you're starting on your own, the best you can, start to be so aware of your environment that you're in and how it makes you feel, like truly, like in your body. How does it make you feel? Do you have stomach issues? Do you have throat issues? Do you get headaches often? And what about your environment is bringing those sensations in? Or have you been living with stomach pains for the last 10 years? you know Being so aware of your environment and the sensations that you feel, like, so the five senses, and I think we talked about that our last interview when you interviewed me last time, is the five senses. What are you taking in? What are you feeling? What are you seeing? What are you tasting? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? you know what are those things? Again, what are you ingesting through your senses? What are you eating? What are you drinking? Who are you hanging out with? What does your environment truly look like? And how does it make you feel? So it's a two-parter, two parts of homework. What does your environment look like and how does it make you feel?
I love that. See, guys, there's a reason I keep getting this woman back. And we talked about it off camera, and I know you're tight for time, so we probably won't be able to get into it today. But if you guys want to know more about kind of the physicality, Steph is saying, like, listen to your body, see how it feels. Which is like, if you've got stomach issues, if you've a headache, if you're not sleeping, these things are all part of this. And that's a realm that we actually went into pretty deep off camera, and then we realized we need to record and get this done. So, I'd love to have you back at another point when we're tighter, we're better for time. And that was my bad. We had a lot of catching up to do. But I'd love to dive into that more. And if you guys are interested, want to hear more of that realm, let me know. We'll find out where Steph's got some gaps in her calendar, and we'll get her back again. And I think this is all really valid information for you guys to take in and start practicing. And like Steph said, making sure you've got that safety to do so. I never want people to feel like pressured to do something or has to jump into it because Amy said it or whatever. Like, you guys feel safe.
No pressure. I just want to say this really quick. Put yourself first with all of this type of work. Like, you come first. If it doesn't feel good to do any of this, don't. It's okay. You don't have to do anything that doesn't feel good for you right now, period. Always. That's part of establishing safety, is knowing that if this doesn't feel good, we're not just going to do it, right? Because then we end up in that cycle again of like, oh, we've just betrayed what actually feels good for our body to establish something else. And then we're stuck in that cycle constantly.
Yeah.
This stuff doesn't work unless you actually truly feel safe to do so. So put yourself first, always. You matter. Yourself first.
Set that boundary with you. Put you first. Like we talk about, I think I talk about it in my episode with Catherine, where she and I were looking to do a podcast episode back in September. And I only just put it out last week, which when this goes out, this will be a couple of weeks later. I put it out in April, at the start of April. And it was like, she was just waiting to the right time for her. She had so many things going on. She couldn't get into the headspace, and she had to put herself first. And, it works, and it was fine. Like, it's knowing when you've got to do that stuff. And hopefully you've got a bit of insight into where to begin from this episode, what kinds of things to look out for. I'd love to hear from you guys if there's certain things that you're like, oh, wow, like I never thought of that before. If you had any light bulb moments, please share it. Please let us know. Steph and I would love to hear, like, if you guys had any realizations or epiphanies while listening to this episode. It's really cool to hear what you guys get from it. So even leave some comments below, reach out to us individually, or reach out to me and I can share it with Steph. But Steph, for anybody, this is maybe the first time they've saw you, or they saw you last time but didn't get your info. If anybody on here wants to reach out to you, whether it's to look into your coaching a bit more, or we know we just love the good old stalk on Instagram and stuff. Like, if anybody wants to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so they can find me at my website, www.stephgermancoaching.com, or my Instagram is at steph.shines.on is my Instagram. So yeah, come stalk
And I will link her info below. If you don't have a pen or anything handy, I'll link it below so you can reach out to her. But Steph, thank you so much for coming on again. And who knows, it by the looks of this, we probably might need to get you on for a third one. But I know you've got your... You're welcome. I know you've got your own life and everything else. So like, to squeeze this in, it really, really helps. And you're going to be helping so many people by sharing this info. So thank you for existing and putting your wonderful mindset out into the world and helping so many people. It's just awesome to have you here.
So, thank you again for having me, Amy. It's such an honor to be here with you to talk about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff. And yeah, like Amy said, anybody that has questions or anything, please reach out. I would love to talk to you guys. And thanks for listening.
Awesome. Well, until next week, guys, stay safe. And again, we'd love to hear what you think. And we'll talk next week. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast this week. I really look forward to hearing what you got from this episode, what you did with regards to your homework this week, and if there was any light bulb moments you had. So please, please, please make sure to let me know what you thought and on what those moments were down below in the comment box. And make sure to subscribe to make sure you do not miss any new episodes. And if you want to be a part of the Rewrite Your Story community, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. And you can follow us at rewriteyourstory.ca on Instagram, Facebook, and our website.